Hi everyone. I'm going to show you how to create a Hello World Java application and deploy it using a simple Chef recipe. Chef is notorious for being complicated, having a big learning curve, and it really is true. The problem is to do anything beyond just the hello world, creating a plain text file. You need to. There are a lot of pieces that you need to add to it. So it ends up just looking like a bunch of shrapnel or a giant jigsaw puzzle when you first take it out of the box. But my hope is, after watching this, it will look a little bit more like this to you, i.e., there'll be some kind of mental model that you can recall whenever you're working with Chef. So let's start by creating a Java project, just straight from a Maven template. We don't intend to create any more functionality within the Java application. I just need to find that Maven command. I don't have it memorized, but I have it in a little text file I have here, but I'm just going to make a new directory. I'll call that directory tutorial. I'm going to create this application. So mvn archetype generate is the command I'm using for that. And what that produces is an app.java file. So I'm just going to open this and edit it slightly. I don't like exclamation marks in log statements. That's one of my pet peeves. And I'm going to put it inside a loop so that it runs forever. So I'm just going to create a jar file out of that. And in fact, to create a jar file, my pom.xml will need an extra plugin for its build phase. So so at the end, I just paste this build in. I add Maven jar plugin, and I have to specify the main class, which is com.mycompany.app. And then I'm going to do mvn install, and I'm in the wrong folder. So to go inside cd inside my app and do mvn install. And you need to make sure you declare that you throw an exception. That aside, I believe this should be all that we need. And I'd be wrong, because I have missed something somewhere. Excuse me, throws exception. Okay, so that should produce a jar file. Now we're going to make use of that in the second stage. So that was our Java application. So now I'm going to create a Chef recipe. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to create a folder called Hello World, which is going to serve as the name of my cookbook. And just going back to my slides, this is ultimately the hierarchy I'm going to have. Cookbooks is already there. It's a directory which contains other recipes. I'm going to add something called Hello World, and under that I'm going to create two directories, and in each of those directories I'm going to create another. I'm going to create one Ruby file in each of those. So I'll cd inside this cookbook called Hello World. I'm going to create something called recipe. Make the IR recipe. In fact, it should be recipes. And inside there, I'm going to create a file called hello world.rb for Ruby. And that is going to contain a few things. Firstly, in fact, I'm going to make my Java app available via a Python simple HTTPD web server. So before I go on, I need to go back to my Java directory and start a web server. Python -m simple HTTP server 9001. And this should be accessible from a web browser. Let's see if that's the case. And I'll have to quickly exit out of my presentation. Localhost 9001. So yes, if we go inside this folder, here is our Java file, our jar file, my app 1.0 snapshot.jar. Anyway, back to our Chef cookbook. We now want to we want to download that file. Well, actually, before we do that, we want to say we need Java as part of running this app, and we need to download this jar file into our virtual machine. So to do that, we'll use this. So remote file is we want it to be created inside a temp directory on Linux, and it's going to have the same name as before, my app 1.0 snapshot, and it's going to come from the same URL I got from the web browser. So I can just copy this link address and paste it here. But in fact, I can't use localhost. I need to use the real IP address. So if I run that will download it into my virtual machine. But I don't want to just download it. I want to run it. That's the full deployment lifecycle. So to do that, I'm going to create another file inside this cookbook, inside this Hello World cookbook. I'm going to create a folder called templates, and inside there, I'm going to create a file called Hello World initd.erb. That's a Ruby template file, and that is going to look a lot like a shell script. In fact, it is a shell script. So if we get a start, it's an initd script. So when starting the service, we are going to execute java -jar myapp.jar, and the output is going to be redirected to a log file. That's all we're doing there. So now back to the recipe file. We want to use that little startup initd script. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to make a copy of that file into our virtual machine, which I'm going to use Vagrant for. We're going to call that file. We're going to copy hello world initd.erb to a file inside our Linux virtual machine called inside etc initd hello world java chef executable. So that's using the template resource of Chef. Once we've created the file, we actually want to invoke that shell script or that daemon. So to do that, we take the name of this file and declare it to be a service, and we tell Chef that it supports the start operation. And we'll retry a few times if it fails initially or it's a bit slow. And in fact, it turns out we do need to wait a few seconds after starting it up because the way the init daemon works is services need to be scheduled to start. So with this in place, we can now run this this chef recipe. And let me just remind you by taking a quick look at the presentation again. This is our structure. We created a recipe, and we've created a template, and that a template of a shell script, and that shell script is going to invoke our jar file after downloading it from this Python server. So in fact, there's one more thing we need. We need to find the Java community cookbook. I didn't create it, but we need to find that, and we need to make sure our Linux instance has Java on it. So to do that, we declare the dependency inside a file called metadata.rb. So I will say in here depends Java. And I have to give this cookbook that I've just created a name, so we'll just call it Hello World. And then what should happen is next to this Hello World directory that we created right at the beginning, there's another directory for Java, and that's the Java Community Cookbook. So now that I have this in place, I can go to I can spin up a virtual machine and deploy it there. So you don't need to worry about Vagrant. That just happens to be the machine that I'm going to deploy it to. But I add the recipe called Hello World : Hello World. The first Hello World is for the cookbook name. The second Hello World is for the recipe name. And a cookbook contains multiple recipes. Okay, so now we just need to say vagrant up -- provision. And this usually takes a little while because we're basically installing Ubuntu, and then we have to install Java, and then we have to install this toy app that we have created. So that's been done. So then we can SSH into this virtual machine. In fact, what did I call it? I don't even think I gave it a name, so I need to run that command again. Vagrant up my VM. Now let's SSH into that machine. So we will cd to the temp directory. What we should see is our jar file. And let's see if we have any Java processes running. Turns out we have more than one due to a little quirk in the way initd works. But the important thing is that Java is now running, and if I tail this log file, I should find that it's printing the hello world line that we had in that little Java app that we wrote earlier. So there you have it. There are also, you can use attributes, you can use databags, but you can read about those more, but it doesn't change the essence of how a cookbook or a recipe is deployed, but it allows you to customize at runtime what exactly you want to deploy.